Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another short war video, and today we have massive escalations happening right now in Europe, Ukraine, and Russia, and let's jump right into it. This morning, Russian officials say that NATO and the EU have declared war on Russia as Russia ramps up a series of major escalations today against the alliance. We also have unprecedented news that the US has ordered virtually all top military leadership to gather at a military base in Virginia for some unknown reason, and just for context, that has literally never happened before. Meanwhile, Russia sent fighter jets to buzz Alaskan and Latvian airspace today. They've also begun to aggressively pursue German satellites in orbit, and more drones have been spotted over Denmark. And while all that is happening, NATO says it's preparing to shoot down Russian fighter jets, as Russia warns that will start World War III instantly, and they threaten consequences. So it is not an understatement, folks. We are closer to war today than we have been literally since World War II, and the escalations are off the chart. I got a whole laundry list of Russian escalations that are happening today alone, and things are getting really uncontrollable right now. So jumping into our first article here, this one goes to Disclosed TV. And right now, this is our biggest story of the day. Right now, we're hearing that Russian officials say that NATO and the EU have declared war on Russia and are directly participating in it, according to Russian state media. So that is an extremely bold statement right there, and that does carry a lot of implications behind that statement. And we're once again hearing the Russian officials say that NATO is at war with Russia, and that does carry something with it. What that basically means is the Russians are going to start treating NATO and the EU as a wartime adversary, and they're going to start ramping up their escalations. That's what that translates to, and we're already seeing that start today. So very disturbing statements right now coming out of Russia, and it kind of matches the severity of what we're seeing right now happening over the skies of Europe. It does match that. So very disturbing statements once again coming out of that meeting right there that we're hearing about from Russian state media. So jumping into our next article here, this one's going to go to 5 News, and we also have unprecedented news coming out of the United States right now as a new military leadership meeting is about to take place. And we are getting word that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered hundreds of U.S. military generals and admirals to gather on short notice at a Marine Corps base in Virginia next week. And the highly unusual directive was sent to virtually all of the military's top commanders worldwide, and according to more than a dozen people familiar with the matter. So this is something unprecedented, folks. I have never personally heard of this happening before, and it seems like many other people that have heard this story have never heard anything like this either. So virtually all of our top leadership worldwide, not just in the United States, but worldwide military command will be meeting in Virginia sometime next week at a Marine Corps base for some unstated purpose. So it's up to speculation what this is about, but I have a very strong feeling that this is possibly a preparation for war against Russia that we're about to see right here at this meeting. So a very interesting choice, and I do question whether or not it's smart to have all of our leadership meeting in one spot. That seems like it could be a security risk, but of course that is a decision that's left up to the US government. But we are hearing that today, which is completely unprecedented. But with that, moving into our next article here, this one goes to Conflict Radar, and also in the meantime, we've heard a wide series of escalations today by the Russian Federation against NATO and European countries. And starting off with our first one here, we have heard from France that unidentified drones were spotted over the weekend over military installations near Montmelon-le-Grand, according to a military source confirming to a news outlet. So it looks like France kept this quiet for a little while. I'm not sure why they chose to keep this quiet, but it looks like some unidentified drones were spotted over a military base over the French territory. So that was apparently happening this weekend, which was about 3 or 4 days ago, and it's being confirmed today that that did indeed occur. So not only was Denmark, Sweden, and Norway having incursions, but also France was having them as well, and apparently even more countries than that might have also been experiencing drone incursions. So it looks like we're hearing more of the story today, and it looks like the story is getting much more ominous looking than we even previously thought. So not good to hear that coming out of France. But moving into our next article here, this one goes to Fintech's Network. Also in the meantime, the United States is not exempt, and y'all might recall last night on the stream we were actually tracking this airspace incursion by Russian aircraft near the Alaskan ADIZ, that is Alaskan airspace, that is, or the Air Defense Identification Zone. Today we have gotten an update from NORAD. NORAD says it intercepted 2 Russian Tu-95 bombers and 2 Su-35 fighter jets in the Alaskan ADIZ, which was last night, and in response to that, the U.S. dispatched F-16s, an E-3, KC-135s, and those stayed in the air until it was actually cleared out. So the aircraft stayed in international airspace. I do want to emphasize that, and NORAD called the activity routine. But I will say I do monitor these quite a bit, and it looks like this time the Russians sent 2 bombers and 2 fighters with it, which is a little bit more than usual. Now it's not totally out of the norm, but at the same time it does seem like a slight bump up from the previous Russian deployments we've seen. And also the U.S. military deployed more aircraft this time than usual as well. So it looks like this is a little bit more serious than usual, but nonetheless it does happen somewhat commonly. but it is a little bit escalated on the Russian side. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Alexandria C4. But one thing that is highly escalated, though, is we have heard that 2 Hungarian Gripens were scrambled from Lithuania to intercept 5 Russian jets flying close to Latvian airspace, and we actually have images of these jets. And this happened this morning, by the way. This is when this occurred. So we did see multiple different Russian incursions near airspace over last night and into the morning. So taking a look here at our photos, you can see there are the jets right there, and there are some more in front of it, and you see obviously Russian jets flying over right there. There's about 5 of them. You can't see the 5th one in the image, but there's 4 right there, but there is 5 of them in total. Right here you can see there's some more images of those jets right there, and there's even a close-up shot right there, and you see there is the red star on the back and that ugly Russian camo pattern right there. So these are the jets flying close to Latvian airspace. So while the Alaskan airspace was being invaded last night, or at least the ADIZ was being invaded, we did see that Latvia was experiencing something similar this morning, so not good to see. But moving into our next post, this one goes to conflict radar. But something even crazier than that, though, because obviously airspace incursions or attempted incursions, that's serious, but we also heard something even more serious today that I've never heard before. We are hearing from the German defense minister, and they say that 2 Russian surveillance satellites are pursuing satellites used by Germany's armed forces. So I've never really heard of a satellite pursuing another satellite, so this is something new. And also we have heard rumors that there are allegedly sabotage satellites in orbit that can pick other satellites apart. So I'm not sure if these are those type of satellites, but I've never really heard of satellites pursuing one another. So it sounds like these could be weaponized satellites or something of that nature. But the big deal is the Russians have sent 2 of their satellites after the German armed forces satellites. So that's a big escalation. It looks like the Russians are escalating in space in addition to escalating over the airspace of these other countries. So also another of the many escalations today by Russia. But jumping into our next one, we have yet even another escalation, and this one goes to EnforcerNews 24/7. And this time we have more news coming out of Denmark, because we've heard that drone activity has been reported yet again over Korsør Port in Denmark, and security forces are patrolling the area. And this happened very early this morning, and as you can see, here is the new location of the new incursion by a new drone right here where the red marker is in the middle of the screen. So generally, it looks like we're seeing a lot of drone incursions around the Copenhagen and Denmark area, literally right in the middle of the screen right here. And this appears to be the target of whoever is launching these drones is this general vicinity right here. So we're seeing more of them over a port this time in Denmark, and the Danish have not really responded to that yet. We're waiting on a statement about it. And I believe while this video is being made, there's currently a press conference underway by the Danish discussing about what this exactly is. So we'll wait to hear about that after the video is finished. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to War Monitor. And we have gotten an update from the Danish, and the Danish say they tell allies that it was a state actor that's behind the recent drone incursions. So already people were pointing fingers at Russia. Russia's obviously aggressing against NATO right now. They just got done attacking Poland the other day. So I would say honestly that Denmark should probably just come out and say it at this point that it was Russia. So, you know, we don't have the concrete proof of that, but pretty much all the indications pointed Russia at this point. So if it was somebody else, I would be shocked, but me personally, I believe it was Russia, and now they're saying a state actor was behind it. So it's not just some innocent civilian flying drones by accident over these places. These are very large drones indeed, flying over F-35 installations and F-16 installations over Denmark. So not a good sign, and I think we're about to hear probably an announcement today that Russia was behind it. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to Visegrad 24. And we've also got an update about why Denmark chose not to shoot these drones down, and they're saying today, according to the Danish Defense Ministry, that the unidentified drones in Denmark were not shot down due to safety concerns. And they do elaborate a little further and say the Danish military chose not to shoot down unidentified UAVs spotted overnight near airports and a military base after a professional assessment by the armed forces and for safety of civilians. And according to the DR, unidentified drones were seen near 4 airports on Wednesday evening, including Aalborg Airport, which hosts the Danish Air Force's Skidstrup Air Base with more than 1,000 personnel and facilities for all the F-16 maintenance and technical work. And local police confirmed there were multiple drones, but they did not specify how many, and flights to the airport were temporarily suspended, and also drones were reported at least 3 other locations across Denmark at the exact same time. So that was, here's all the incursions, by the way. Here's the map. You can see all the different spots they were actually intruded on. So obviously a very wide-reaching effort to intrude very strategic sites in Denmark. And once again, the Danish are saying it's a state actor. I would say this looks like an attack in my opinion. So that is something we're seeing there. And also I believe one of the Danish officials also called an attack the other day when it happened the last time. So once again, this is why they didn't shoot them down. But in my opinion, Denmark made a big mistake. They should have shot these things down if they had the safe opportunity to do so. And I'm sure that the drone probably was in an open field or some area they could have shot it down. down, but they chose not to. So the Danish took the easy way by not shooting the drones down, but in my opinion, that's going to embolden Russia even further to do even more stuff because they're really not getting combated right now by the NATO alliance. But moving into our next post here, this one goes to Conflict Radar, and we're also hearing that Denmark is contemplating invoking NATO's Article 4 due to the repeated unidentified drone incursions into its airspace, according to its defense ministers. So Denmark could be the third time that Article 4 has been invoked in just about a month or so. Denmark could be the third. So it looks like they're planning on doing that, and I would say the odds of that are extremely high that they will invoke Article 4, which is basically a consultation with NATO members. It's not a declaration of war against Russia, it's simply a consultation. So we saw Poland and I believe Latvia do that, if I have it correct. Definitely Poland though, and so far those countries have done that, and it looks like Denmark could be the next. So also big news with that. But moving into our next one, this one goes to Fitex News. And also, speaking of shooting stuff down that's intruding on NATO airspace, we have heard today that even though the United States gave its blessing to NATO to shoot down the Russian aircraft, it sounds like the NATO allies are divided over whether the alliance should make it a policy to shoot down Russian jets that violate NATO's airspace, and the US, Poland, and Baltic nations want to signal that future violations will be met with force. However, Germany and some southern European countries are worried that such language is too escalatory. So it looks like some countries are not quite sure if they want to commit to this yet, because of course, even if it is warranted and justified, it could lead to a direct war with Russia nonetheless, because it looks like Putin is trying to provoke a war by doing this. So in my opinion, I say they should be shot down. If a jet is invading a NATO country, then obviously shoot it down. You can't let that happen, or otherwise, at that point, you don't have control over your airspace. So it seems like a pretty straightforward thing to me, but it looks like some countries are sort of wrestling with that possibility about whether they should do it or not. But one country that's not playing around though is Poland. And moving into our next post here, also from Fight Talks, we've heard that Poland's preparing to amend its law on military deployments abroad to allow its forces to shoot down Russian objects such as drones over Ukraine without prior NATO or EU approval. So it looks like they're basically, Poland is ramping this up to the extreme, which is honestly probably the best move they can make. And Poland is saying they're going to let their soldiers shoot down Russian drones over Ukraine without approval. So that's a big one right there. That basically gives Poland soldiers the right to shoot down anything over Ukraine's airspace. So that's a big story right there. And also, we did hear that Poland is going to shoot down, or they're changing the law to shoot down stuff over their own domestic airspace as well. So Poland's not messing around. Like, they're really taking a strong approach here, and that is the right move to send a strong message to Vladimir Putin. So that's very good on Poland's part. But moving into our next one here, this one goes to Military News Ukraine. And this might be the reason right here that the NATO countries are a little bit scared about shooting down the Russian jets, because the Russians are running their mouth like crazy, like it's going out of style right now, and the Russians are saying that war will begin if NATO shoots down a Russian plane, according to Russian ambassador to France, and saying that this would mean the beginning of a military conflict. So based on the alleged statements here from the ambassador to France of Russia, this right here appears to be a direct threat to start World War III over a Russian jet entering NATO airspace. So make that make sense. It would seem like Russia should be threatened instead, that you don't fly stuff over NATO airspace if you don't want your stuff shot down. That seems like the logical thing to say, but right now, not really seeing that very much. Not really seeing that. So we'll have to see where this goes, but right now, Russia is at least claiming that it'll start World War III if one of their fighter jets are shot down. But I think it's going to be an inevitable thing. It's going to probably happen, and Russia better stop doing that before they test the response. But moving into our next post here, this one goes to OSINT Technical, and in the meantime, though, Ukraine said, hold my beer, because Ukraine is taking Russian jets down no matter what. They don't care what anybody's saying. Ukraine today took down a Russian Su-34, and we did hear from a Russian Air Force adjacent mill blogger, Fighter Bomber, they confirmed the loss of a Russian Su-34 to Ukrainian fire, and Ukrainian forces shot the aircraft down early this morning as it was bombing Zaporizhia. So this thing right here was carrying out terror on Ukrainians, and it looks like the Ukrainians were able to take this thing down. Right here you see in the post, there is the plane. Also, by the way, Fighter Bomber is a aspiring poet. He said, "And when you are suddenly left without skin because they killed him, not you." I have literally no idea what that means, and that's, I think he better stick to his day job. The poet career is probably not going anywhere, but that was what he said in his post about the Su-34, so I would say too bad for the Russians. But anyways, moving on to our next one here, this one goes to OSINT Technical. Also, you know what else is making the Russians weep is that gasoline shortage. This might explain why Putin is feeling so desperate at this point, because all these actions that Russia's taking right now are not actions of a strong nation, they are actions of a desperate nation in the death throes of a failing government. That's what it basically usually is. That's why they're aggressing against NATO. It makes no sense, but they're left with no other option because Putin has led them to a destruction inside of Russia. So to show you that destruction, we see that Moscow, a capital of Russia, has been hit by gasoline shortages, according to local media. And following Ukraine's ongoing drone campaign, multiple Moscow area cities are reporting shortages of popular gasoline grades, price hikes, and rationing. And seen below, a Moscow area station is out of 95 octane gas. As you can see right here, they are out of it. There's literally no price on the board because apparently they don't have it. So the crisis has spread to the elite in Moscow. That is probably the most dangerous thing that could happen for Putin's regime stability, is for the Moscow elites to get worried that their gasoline is about to disappear. So in other words, the Ukrainians have done a fantastic job of hitting Russian oil refineries, and I've been saying the whole time that Ukraine should really hone in on that because that is the quickest way to bring this war to an end, and taking the Russian economy down is the quickest way to end this war in Ukraine, because if they don't have money to fight the war, then the war is going to come to an end unless China or somebody else bails them out. So this right here is obviously having a real impact, and it's really working very quickly and also making Putin very desperate. So we are seeing that today. But moving into our next post here, we're seeing more desperation by the Russians, and this one goes to Spravdy Stratcom Center. And we can see here that residents of Russia's Belgorod region say they will be totally out of fuel in just 1 to 2 days, and that is crazy right there. We are hearing that drivers have only enough gas for 1 to 2 days, according to Belgorod residents, and they are panicking out here. They are literally panicking that they don't have gas. So Belgorod has been the ire of the Ukrainians at this point when it comes to striking Belgorod, and it looks like Belgorod's also out of gas as well. So it looks like it's spreading rapidly. The gas shortage is really, really bad. But our next one here goes to Max 25, and in the meantime, the Russians are trying to solve the gas crisis by mobilizing their fuel tanker trucks and sending gas down to Simferopol and all their large cities of Crimea. So we did see here in the video these tanker trucks heading out to Crimea, so let's take a look. So as you can see right there, there are a lot of fuel trucks heading down to Crimea. It looks like a little convoy of fuel trucks actually heading down to that area. So they are going that way. They're trying to fix the fuel crisis, but these few trucks right here are going to be pretty much zapped up pretty quickly by the Russians. They are hungry for gas, hungry for more, and I think they're going to take this up pretty quick. And then also you're going to have people probably trying to hoard it too because they're panicking. So there's the long convoy. That's pretty much showing the whole thing right there in the video, showing you what the Russians are trying to do to fix it, but this is not really the way to fix it. This right here is a temporary fix that's not going to last very long. But moving into our next post here, this one goes to Null Reports. And right here in this post, we see the Russian propaganda Soliev, also known colloquially here on this channel as the Devil, has warned that Ukraine is preparing for a major offensive and claims the West could supply all the equipment needed that Ukraine needs, and Ukraine has no shortage of manpower. And then he pivoted to suggest that Russia should consider weapons that the West believes it should never use. So once again, the nuclear threat's being lobbed around. That's no surprise whatsoever. That is the atypical Russian thing to do. They love to threaten world destruction whenever they feel like they're not getting their way. So also, by the way, he is telling the truth about one thing though. There is a major Ukrainian offensive coming up soon. We did hear that Zelensky informed the U.S. president of that at the White House the other day and told the U.S. president that they need U.S. intelligence, the Ukrainians do, to be able to fight that offensive effectively. So it was unclear if the U.S. president agreed to that or not. I don't think we got a direct answer on that, but I have a very strong feeling that the Ukrainians will get the intelligence they need to fight that offensive. So the Russians are also panicking about that because they could be about to lose and get pushed back on the front lines too when Ukraine starts that massive offensive. So the Russians don't have anything to be very hopeful about right now, and they've led themselves that situation. They did it to themselves, and they let Putin also do it to the civilians. So it's their fault, and now they're paying the consequences. But moving into our next one here, this one goes to Max 25. Also, by the way, we did hear from Lukashenko, and Lukashenko said, Oreshnik is already on its way to Belarus. So apparently the Oreshnik, which is a IRBM missile, which the Russians have used a couple of times in Ukraine without a warhead, that is, are apparently on their way to Belarus. That is a nuclear-capable IRBM missile, by the way, and Belarus is wanting to get themselves dragged into it, and Lukashenko is going to blame it all on Fluffy. But all jokes aside, though, this is a pretty serious escalation as well, and Lukashenko is allowing his country, Belarus, which is a puppet state of Russia, to be dragged right into the situation, which is a very, very bad move for him. So, you know, of course, Lukashenko is not the brightest on the block, and this is definitely not a bright decision to make. But anyways, folks, that is actually our last post of the video. So before you go, folks, make sure you smack the like button and also subscribe to the channel as well if you found the video informative. And also, by the way, like literally, we are close to World War today, folks. I'm not saying that to exaggerate. We are literally getting very, very close to that. Not saying it's going to happen with certainty, but all the indications are right now is the Russians are escalating to the extreme. They're saying that they're at war with NATO, and they're saying that NATO's at war with them. So it looks pretty bad right right now. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And it looks like the U.S. might be preparing to go to war with Russia. So certainly trying times. It's not time to panic, by the way. It's not time for that. Like, I know people are going to be like, oh my God, like this means war. All we have to do is simply wait, see what's going to happen, and trust in leadership to see what they're going to do. So, have faith a little bit, folks. Have faith in our leadership. But anyways, with that, folks, thank you all for watching. We will see you all tonight to cover the rest of the wild events throughout the day, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on our nightly war news stream. And also, folks, before you go check out our Patreon page, and the link is in the description below for Patreon, where you can go over there and sign up for a monthly membership, and it could be as little as $5 or $10 a month. Any amount helps the channel tremendously, as it's your support that keeps the whole thing running. So we do appreciate that very, very much. And with that, we will see you all tonight, and with that, bye-bye for now.